mall walker.
First week of 5th grade. Here goes nothing. Let's not sugarcoat it. School sucked, but allow me to plead my case as to why Crooked Lake Elementary took the cake when it came to misery. It was because of one reason, and that reason's name was Peter Davis, otherwise known as Tiny Pete. Tiny was the largest kid in school. Having mostly Neanderthal DNA and being held back 2 years will do that. I'm no psychologist, but I'm guessing his reign of schoolyard terror can be attributed to the overcompensation this unfortunate and ill-fitting nickname required. He also had a severe lisp that never seemed to improve no matter how many speech therapists they threw at it. I was an easy target. Being the new kid, as well as half Korean in an all-Caucasian school, was a perfect storm. Besides the daily barrage of unoriginal Asian slurs, I was also given a few nicknames of my own. Charlie, Sushi, Chopstick, Chow Mein, and Bruce Lee. The first 4 stung a bit, but I didn't really mind being called Bruce Lee since he was my hero. Pete's technique while simulating kung fu to accompany the nickname, though, that was downright offensive. Bruce would never throw such pathetic strikes. It was Crooked Lake tradition for all new students to stand in front of the class and field questions from students and the teacher, a newbie Q&A if you will. Though my Eastern ethnicity made me seem exotic, my answers weren't nearly as interesting as they anticipated. The looks of disappointment were obvious, including Mrs. Anderson's, when they found out my favorite food was lasagna and not kimchi, and that I was actually born in Bismarck, North Dakota instead of some hard-to-pronounce location on the other side of the world. Peter responded with,
"That's a lie. You was born in China or something."
He never raised his hand and just shouted whatever came to his brilliant little mind. The class chuckled while Mrs. Anderson snapped her fingers and pointed at the door. Not a single student seemed surprised, including Peter as he took the walk of shame. I'm guessing he has his own reserved seat in the principal's office by now. The next day, Peter dared me to eat a worm during recess, the fattest one he could find. Apparently an act of petty revenge. A line of afternoon storms had just passed, and an army of the squirmy creatures now littered the playground. Not just the worms, but students as well. I held it for a bit, stalling, as it made a strange tickle in my hand, wiggling around. I just couldn't get up the nerve. A chant began to surround us as my classmates egged me on.
Eat it, eat it, eat it.
The point of no return had been crossed, and everyone knew it. Peter's sinister grin grew even wider. Not following through now was something I would never live down. The time had come to unleash the magic phrase. The 3 little words that seemed to get me to do anything daring, dangerous, or in this case, disgusting.
Here goes nothing.
And down it went. There's a real power to that phrase. MacGyver and Magnum P.I. said it all the time just before performing a cunning stunt, like cutting a wire to disarm a bomb or jumping out of an airplane. Adopting the phrase was a given since I wanted to be just like them. The problem was that I didn't have many exciting adventures of my own, so it only got used during normal, boring, everyday situations. Mom would ask me to finish my peas, to which I'd reply,
"Okay, here goes nothing."
Our babysitter, Darla, who was also my first crush, would tell us to pick up our toys, and I'd bravely declare,
"All right, well then, here goes nothing."
Instead of looking impressed, though, like the ladies on TV did, she just rolled her eyes and went back to talking with her boyfriend on the phone. I'd even say it as I plopped down on the toilet seat to do my business.
Here goes nothing.
My dad once ate the magui worm that was at the bottom of a mezcal tequila bottle, sort of a treat for whoever got the last shot. He seemed to revel at the dramatic reaction we gave him as he did it. I believe I felt the same sensation just now as everybody on the playground let out a collective, "Ew." Peter, in disbelief, demanded to see the underside of my tongue, as if hiding the worm in my mouth was any easier than just gulping it down. Finally convinced, he asked,
"What did it taste like?"
I swallowed it so quickly, like when I have to take the sharp white adult aspirin pills, that I couldn't really say, but the residual flavors of dirt and grass remained long after the creature reached my stomach. I almost gagged and threw it back up, but forced myself to keep it down along with today's school lunch. The playground was no place to show weakness. Another way to get branded with a nickname was to have something embarrassing happen to you within the school's perimeter. The kid who experienced stomach issues on track and field day was now known as Shit Stain, after the crooked brown line that appeared from the back of his shorts to his shoe during the three-legged race. His partner was so distraught, he immediately ripped his foot out of his own Reebok, which was tied to Shit Stain's soiled Nike, and left it behind, going the rest of the day hobbling around on one tube sock. And poor Mary Erickson's first period arrived in the school pool, coincidentally during first period gym class, giving her the name, you guessed it, Bloody Mary. That was bad enough, but since the old legend warned against saying the name 3 times in a row, that's just what the little bastards did. My name's Lucas, Luke for short. So if I had thrown up the worm, they would have surely called me Pukey Luke or Luke the Puke. And if the class was feeling really creative, they might have come up with a little rhyme to go along with it.
Pukey Lucas ate a worm, threw it up and watched it squirm.
March 15th, 2008. Pine Square Mall. This place is a corpse of what it once was, left to rot out in full view of the public like a fly-infested beached whale. Someone just needs to bury it. But please, not until my lease is up. Walking through the front door is like entering a time machine set to 1979. The floors are made up of large, dark brown tiles that look filthy no matter how often they're mopped. The color scheme, pale green, orange, and a whole lot of puce, is straight from the TV game show The Price is Right, the vintage era, way before Bob Barker's hair turned shockingly white. Outlining the patterned walls is that scalloped clamshell trim that seemed to be all the rage around the time my dad was a swinging teen. Most of the fluorescent lights have burnt out, and no one seems to be in any hurry to replace them. I'm sure they think the natural light coming through the giant white plastic ceiling rectangles will suffice, but the sun goes down around 7 p.m., turning an already dreary shopping experience into nightmare fuel. They should install some colored lights, hang a disco ball, blast some ABBA, rent out roller skates, and change the name to Shop and Skate or perhaps Roller Mall. Might actually breathe some life into this dank carcass. 4 tenants are all that remain. A Chinese restaurant, a church of some unknown denomination, a lonely little thrift shop at the other end, and now my lesson studio. But Pine Square used to be fully occupied with all kinds of stores, and even a decent pirate-themed retro arcade named Arcade, which wasn't its original name. It was forced to change it from Booty Town after the mall received multiple complaints from parents. Arcade housed games like Dragon's Lair, Mortal Kombat, Tempest, Miss Pac-Man, and my all-time favorite, the ultra-futuristic-looking Tron. Something about how the blue light glowed through the translucent joystick made it stand out. Arcade was unlike these modern game rooms filled with ticket prize machines, where you might win big, maybe even hundreds of tickets. But at the end of the day, you're lucky to walk out with a ring pop on your finger. Another former occupant was a pizza shop called Gino's. It was so popular that the moment you mentioned the mall's name, people's eyes would light up and they'd yell, "Gino's!" in their best accent while making the Italian hand gesture, just like in the commercials. It's fun to do. Go ahead and try it if you haven't already. As business grew, they upgraded to a nicer location on the good side of town. And since there was now less foot traffic, the other mall tenants began to suffer and eventually had to either move out or shut down for good. This explained the desperate look on the property manager's face when he tried to rope me into a ridiculously long 10-year lease. He obviously doesn't know who he's dealing with. I'm the guy who almost got cold feet while recently signing the paperwork for a 3-year car loan. These commitment issues, paired with the feeling of uncertainty due to the current recession, made declining his initial proposal the obvious move. Can't commit to a decade at this point. I'm not even sure what next month will bring. Not the best thing to say to a potential landlord, but it was honest, and once again, they seemed desperate. This desperation gave me a rare bit of leverage as I negotiated it down from 10 years to a manageable and much less terrifying 4. Derek McLean. It's 15 minutes past closing time when we finally wrap up. Derek's lesson usually goes late because we have a lot in common and often bullshit the whole time. He still insists on paying. We're around the same age and both grew up in a northern Minneapolis suburb. Our 3 favorite topics are B-rated horror movies. I would just say B-horror movies, but some people think I mean horror films about bees like Candyman or The Swarm. when I'm really talking about films that are so bad they somehow become good again. We're also obsessed with conspiracy theories and, of course, all things music, especially rock. Last week we spent most of the lesson debating if Paul McCartney died in 1966 and got replaced by a lookalike. Derek thinks he did, but my theory is that he was actually abducted by Greys and replaced by a clone. Big difference. We finish our weekly routine. He packs up his blue Fender Stratocaster guitar that he bought because it's the same one Bob Mould of Husker Du plays, and I turn off the gear and untangle and wrap up the cables.
When'd you install that?
He asks, staring at my lesson room TV monitor, which is now connected to a security camera. The camera's located in the lobby and points down at the entrance door where students come in from the mall. Its brand name is Realistic, which is a Radio Shack product relabeled because most people might balk at buying something expensive with the name Radio Shack on it. Just another one of my crazy theories. The name Realistic doesn't really inspire a ton of confidence either. The quality of the camera is shoddy. Grainy black and white footage, and there's always a line of static somewhere. I put it in a few nights ago. I just can't rely on my ears after all the years of playing crazy loud gigs and attending rock concerts.
What?
Jokes Derek, cupping his ear and making one of his famous dad jokes. I give him an obvious pity laugh, which still somehow satisfies him. Sometimes I don't hear the front door from my teaching room, and a parent interested in lessons for their kid is left waiting around. Some get impatient and leave all pissed off, and the next day I end up with a voicemail from them tearing me a new one. The last one was some annoyed mom saying,
"Hey, buddy, you should get like a secretary or a damn bell or something." Jeez Louise.
Why not just get a bell? It'd be way cheaper.
"Because I'm not one of Pavlov's frickin' dogs," I say, only half joking. Anyway, this setup allows me to know who's in the lobby area too. 99 out of 100 times it's my next student, but once it was this random dude from the mall who looked like Ted Nugent. He was just loitering there, resting his feet and watching School of Rock on my TV. I was too afraid to ask him to leave, so he ended up staying until the end credits were rolling. That waiting room chair reeked of Uncle Ted for weeks. It was like a bad mix of cigarette smoke, stale clothes, and brute cologne. Derek jumps up in excitement.
Oh man, you gotta play me that footage. I had to see how much he looks like the Nuge. Maybe he's a clone.
There's no footage. I mean, that old thing doesn't actually record anything. I call it a security camera, but it's really not. Might be enough to scare off potential burglars if they saw it, but it's really just a second set of eyes for me during business hours. Derek looks deeply into the flickering screen.
Doesn't it kind of creep you out though? Like, after everyone goes home and you're all alone in this big empty mall? Betcha my brain would start bugging out and make me see things that weren't there.
That did happen. After everything was finally up and running, I checked the screen and for some reason got fixated on it, like it was hypnotizing me. Then I swore I saw a shadow pass by the window and the door, so I ran out to check on it. Whoever it was either exited the building at record speed or was never there in the first place. Probably just a glitch on the screen though.
Maybe it was that mall walker your girlfriend mentioned.
He made sure to emphasize the girlfriend part. I probably shouldn't have told him about Lisa, the girl who works at Happy Hippie Thrifty Gifties at the other end of the mall. She's not my girlfriend, as Derek claims, just a friend who happens to be my type. Super chill with a hippie soul and a gothic look. Imagine a deadhead version of a 20-something-year-old Winona Ryder. Derek just likes to give me grief about my love life, or lack of one, which has been the case since the incident of August 13, 2006. The day that's entirely responsible for my current situation. They say bad things happen in threes. July 1st, 2006, 44 days out. Number 1, Bitch Fist breaks up. Our stock as best high school rock band plummeted the moment everyone tossed their cardinal red graduation caps in the air and signed their final yearbooks. We weren't even getting weekend gigs anymore, and playing stadium rock covers to empty bars began to feel embarrassing, not to mention insulting. Nothing like performing a sing-along rock anthem only to hear the sound man's lone drunken voice yelling along.
"You get your balls to the wall, man."
I even stopped inviting friends and family because I didn't want them witnessing our shame. Oh, how the mediocre have fallen. The last straw was Conrad, our bassist, not being able to afford his share of the practice space rent. Again. With no one able to cover his $65 this time, and an all-out blowout in the van ride home, we finally put the band out of its misery. Though a few of us still wanted to keep it going, we all knew deep down that Bitch Fist had run its course. Sad as hell to have 4 years as a band, not to mention friends just fizzle out. July 15th, 2006, 29 days out. Number 2, I lose my job. Tritone Music was a retail store in the back of East Town Mall. It was the best job I ever had up to that point. The manager, Everett, let me grab any guitar off the wall and jam whenever the sales floor was devoid of customers, which was most of the time, unless it was nearing school band season. I was glad he wasn't one of those, if there's time to lean, there's time to clean type of bosses, but still, something was off about him. He'd tell the story of how he used to hang out with Edie Brickell, the singer of Edie Brickell and the New Bohemians. They had that hit song called What I Am, and Edie had a habit of squatting a lot while performing. There's actually a parody song of it that goes, I'm not aware of too many things, but I know that it looks like I pee when I sing. He said the two of them were strolling around New York City back in 1988. He was on foot and she was on roller skates, circling him like an electron orbiting a nucleus. His nerdy analogy, not mine. When Paul Simon pulled up in his limo and asked Edie if she wanted a ride. Everett never saw her again and had to learn about her and prickhead Paul, once again his words not mine, getting hitched from the cover of the National Enquirer. He left out the best part though, which was told to me by assistant manager Steve during Everett's day off. Turns out that when he saw the headline of the Enquirer, he viciously tore it in half and tossed the pieces in the air. Since this all happened in line at the grocery store, the cashier, who turned out to be a part-time self-defense instructor, came over and demanded he both pick up the mess and pay for the destroyed tabloid. Everett was in such a crazed state of mind that he just reared back and tried to strike the guy. Unfortunately for Everett, his own punching technique was as poor as Tiny Pete's, but the cashier's skills were legit. He easily dodged the punch and performed an impressive takedown. A stunned Everett found himself face down on the cold, hard grocery store tiles with his punching hand now ratcheted so far up the center of his back, he thought his shoulder would snap.
And you want to know the kicker?
Steve whispered as he leaned in to dish the rest of the story. There's more? I asked.
Guess who was staring up at him from the floor?
Who? I was baffled, but then connected the dots. No way!
Yes, Paul Simon's smiling face from the magazine cover. The cashier had unknowingly slammed him down in the perfect spot to be face to face with Paul's half of the torn up wedding picture.
It took a moment for this image to really sink in. It's almost like when a dog pisses on the floor and their owner punishes them by rubbing their nose in it.
Damn right.
Good Lord, how do you bounce back from that?
He hasn't. Oh, by the way, don't tell him I told you all this, all right?
I nodded.
The poor guy confided in me after 3 Long Islands during one of our post-work Chili's meetups, and I've been dying to tell someone ever since. Might make me a bad friend, but I was about to burst.
I did have my doubts of the validity of the Edie story, as well as Everett's sanity. However, this new information made it much more believable. Now I just felt sorry for him. Conversations like these really made the time fly by, and though the other employees weren't as interesting as Everett and Steve, they were okay, except Ziggy. But due to poor sales, and apparently some class action lawsuit the company suffered for charging too much interest on rental instruments, Tritone went under, and all my coworker friends, and Ziggy, ended up disappearing with it. We had a couple reunions at Chili's and everyone came, except Ziggy, but people moved on and got new jobs, and soon the old crew was whittled down to just Everett and me. We felt awkward, and he ran out of hard-to-believe stories, so that ended up being our final gathering. Severance was pathetic, and I was growing concerned, wondering how long $137 would last me. A week later, though, after the money ran out, my best friend Christian decided he needed a career change and offered up his job delivering the second most popular newspaper in the state. That's kind of an inside joke because there are only 2 major newspapers in Minnesota, and 95% of the residents preferred the Star to the paper that I was now peddling, which was the Pioneer. We weren't even the Pepsi to their Coke. We were more like the RC Cola of local print media. It wasn't a dream job, but you know what they say about choosy beggars. It took about a week to get into the groove, but from there the task could be accomplished while my mind was set to autopilot. Life was slowly getting back on track. August 6th, 2006. 1 week out. Number 3. Bella delivers the final blow. Going too far into the details might cause me to relapse back into that bottomless pit of depression, so here's the abridged, PG version of the story. My ex reunited with her ex in a car in the back of a church where they had just attended the wedding of their mutual friend. Weddings did always bring out Bella's romantic side. Insert uncomfortable laughter here. August 13th, 2006. A desperate leap of faith. The night I heard the news was a chaotic blur of raw emotion. I nearly achieved all 7 stages of grief at once, leaving me terribly exhausted and wanting to just crawl into bed. But it was Saturday, and the Sunday papers weren't going to deliver themselves. Besides, working might act as a much-needed distraction from all this. Spoiler, that last sentence does not age well. I reached my arm between the seats, blindly feeling around the pile of jewel cases in the back seat, and pulled out tonight's winning selection. As pathetic as it sounds, this gave me a spark of excitement, since it was dark and I had to wait until the CD began playing before I knew which album was chosen. I really needed to get a life. I slid the disc into the deluxe Alpine CDE 7826 CD player, equipped with those square transparent green preset buttons, and heard the rotating 5th chords of Crucify begin to play. Tori Amos's Little Earthquakes was to be tonight's soundtrack. Seemed almost too perfect not to be the work of fate. Accompanying the music was a new film premiering in my mind entitled Backseat Bella, showing on infinite loop in high-definition 3D and surround sound. Quite the immersive experience. Every touch, kiss, thrust, moan, and climax seemed so vivid and much more real to me than actual life, which was now just a sleepwalking dream state. I hardly even remembered delivering most of the 25 papers that night, but I believe it was around number 12 that I let out the most painful scream I ever recall leaving my throat. Tension always finds a way out, if not in one big burst, then in micro drips of prolonged poison. I chose the former for once. I just can't do this anymore, I thought as the final Sunday edition found its place on the doorstep of 201 Hemlock Drive. This neon green house, guarded by that old, sad-eyed, arthritic, gray-haired lab named Zippy, was the last one on my route. Knowing I was quitting and now having nothing to lose, I frisbee-tossed the Pioneer at the door from my passenger side window, just to finally see how it felt. We were explicitly trained to set each paper down gently.
Pretend it's made out of glass,
Howard would say. You gotta respect, or perhaps pity, a guy who cares that much about a paper route. My aim was surprisingly true, and it landed on the doormat that for some reason read, "Welcome to Red Lobster. Wipe your claws." Zippy wasn't impressed and gave me that, "You gotta be kidding me" side-eye look that dogs sometimes do. Should always have done it like this. It's kind of fun, but not for this customer. Petting Zip was the best part of the job and the only thing I'll really miss. Speaking of, I yanked the car door handle and got out. There's no way I'm quitting without saying goodbye. He actually stood up this time to receive my head scratches. This meant a lot knowing how bad his joints were. It was one of those goodbyes we all dread. The, I know I'll never see you again goodbye. And I'm not ashamed to admit to blinking out and wiping away a few tears that had pooled heavy on my bottom eyelids. He continued to stand as I drove off. Perhaps he knew it was the last time as well, as I watched him get smaller and smaller until he finally disappeared in my side mirror. Returning back to the main warehouse was bittersweet. On one hand, I'd never have to see or smell the place again. Imagine warm newspapers, body odor, and the steely scent of machinery. But on the other hand, there was only a terrifying void waiting on the other side of this leap of faith. I placed the keys to the dispenser boxes, along with my immediate hand-scribbled resignation on Howard's desk. He's gonna be pissed as hell and have some scrambling to do, but I couldn't worry about him right now. He'll be fine. My sanity, though, wasn't nearly as resilient. The final act as I left was dropping 3 quarters into the Coke machine near the exit and buying a celebratory can of Mr. Pibb. Did I know how to live it up or what? Tip the scale. As I stepped out for the last time, a shift happened inside of me. Losing the band, my favorite job, and a long-term relationship all came with that painful sting that loss can bring. Loss that I had little to no say over. But quitting the paper gave me a new sensation. For once, I had complete command over how something ended. Now, in a normal brain, this would have been some Tony Robbins level empowerment shit, but mine was still in a warped state after the triple shot of catastrophe. That intoxicating feeling of control began to further possess me. It never occurred that I wielded such a power. It began to expand into my soul like demonic Evil Dead branches. The chilled can of Mr. Pibb was still sweating on the passenger seat, and a random thought bubbled up, pardon the pun. I could just chuck this out the window if I wanted to. As ludicrous as this thought was, out flew the Pibb, giving me a jolt of pleasure as it exploded upon impact. What else can I do? I could run the stoplight, turn the radio all the way up to 11, and even drive on the wrong side of the road. The ideas wouldn't stop, with the lights off. Life up until then was mostly just following orders given by questionable authority figures. But now, all at once, I was making the decisions myself. A godlike sensation came over me. But the biggest realization didn't arrive until I flew through the blinking red lights. One that was so epic, so supreme, that it made tossing pop cans and driving with my lights off seem bush league. No matter what happens or how bad it gets, even if I robbed a bank and were being chased by 20 squad cars, I possess the ultimate get-out-of-jail card. I have the power to decide my own fate, to choose if I live and accept the consequences, or die and essentially flip over this game board of life. It frightened me a bit, taking so much pleasure entertaining these nihilistic fantasies. My mouth became dry from all the excitement. Damn, I could really go for that can of Pibb right now. The song Precious Things was reaching its climax as the I-94 bridge approached, causing my mind to make a sinister computation. I bet at like 70 miles an hour, this car could plow through that gap that's just before the railing. My foot thrusted the accelerator to the hilt, and the old Concorde, struggling to respond to my demands, stuttered and sputtered, but somehow got up to 65 miles an hour. Close enough. The gap that I casually passed each night now became a possible escape portal. A way out of this hell. An end to the haunting Bella movie. Fuel was shooting through the car's engine like the adrenaline now coursing through my body. As the temperature gauge closed in on that red letter H, my hands death gripped the wheel and awaited the perfect moment to veer hard left. All this reminded me of the time we took our weekly trip to the grocery store in the old 76 Buick Electra Estate wagon. Dad thought it would be amusing to let my 4-year-old self sit on his lap and pretend to drive. He had me steer while his foot controlled the accelerator. He also stealthily kept his thumb on the bottom of the wheel in case we started drifting into the other lanes. What he underestimated, though, was the power of a young, curious mind wondering what it was like to be Bo and Luke Duke from the TV show The Dukes of Hazzard. To my excitement, and to my family's horror, I jacked the steering wheel as hard as I could with the car going about 45 miles per hour. Dad's legs violently flexed as he buried the brake pedal into the Buick's rusty floor. The sound of my mom gasping was only outdone by the screech of the tires. We did a few 360s, I guess that would be a 720, under an overpass and came to an awkward stop. Thankfully, we were the only car on that stretch of road, but the damage to the brakes, wheels, and my family's nerves had been done. Mom was breathing hard, with one hand on her chest and the other on the dash, while the smoke caused from the scorched Firestone tires encircled the car. Dad didn't hear the end of it for days. However, Mom had mercy on me since she thought I was too young to fully grasp what I had done. But now, as I saw my much older hands on the Concorde steering wheel, there was still that familiar zap of excitement as they teetered between fates. However, I am now old enough to know better. The powerful phrase returned to offer the push needed to tip the scale. Here goes nothing. Rock bottom. A flash of red and blue police lights appear out of nowhere in my rearview mirror, presenting me with the ultimate ultimatum. Do I face the consequences or flip the game board over? My eyes darted back and forth from the mirror to the oncoming bridge as my father's voice reverberated a memory.
You remind me of your uncle. Always having big ideas, but never having the guts to see them through.
A blast of the siren finally puts an end to the trance, as well as the wild goose chase. The squeak of the brakes become my call of surrender as I pull over and attempt to compose myself. This is going to be a hard one to explain. What a terrible time for the engine to steam and for asthmatic symptoms to arrive. Reaching for an inhaler or anything as a cop approaches is a bad idea, especially in a dark car in the middle of the night. At this point, sitting and suffering was all I could do. Thoughts filled my head as I waited for the policeman to walk up. A hefty fine, or at the very least a stern lecture was surely coming. Probably both. I couldn't afford another ticket. I still had the last one hiding out of sight, out of mind in the glove compartment. I rolled the window down to meet the officer, but was instead met with the sound of someone desperately trying to hold back laughter. Here it was, only moments past near self-inflicted oblivion, and this guy's almost doubled over in hysterics. Took him a good while too before he finally calmed down enough to continue with the traffic stop. He asked for my license and registration, and I wanted to ask him what was so goddamn funny.
Do you know why I pulled you over?
Typically, I'd answer with a simple no to avoid any self-damning confessions, but my adrenaline was still coursing, temporarily numbing my fear of consequences. Yes, because I was speeding and driving like a maniac, I say, conveniently leaving out the other infractions.
Well, I'm glad you're aware of your reckless behavior, but what really caught my attention were the sparks flying out of the back of your vehicle. Looked like the 4th of July when you passed by.
Yeah. My dad tried to tie the muffler to the frame with a metal hanger, but it must be coming loose. I heard it scraping the pavement a few times, but didn't realize it was shooting sparks. Again, I could tell the officer was holding back the giggles. He pretended to cough into his cupped hand a few times to try to cover for it as he crossed his arms and gave the car the old once over twice, scanning from bumper to rusty bumper.
Had the same car back in the day. An 86 AMC Concorde, right?
I nodded, even though he was off by a year.
I had the same color and the same issue with the muffler too. Except mine eventually fell clean off. That's why I pulled you over. Don't want that happening to you now.
I appreciated the concern, and it was great that we were bonding over our shitty cars and all, but my asthma was now kicking my ass, and I figured I was still in trouble for the other antics.
Well, get her fixed, okay? Oh, and turn your headlamps on for God's sake. It's the middle of the night.
The officer handed me a fix-it ticket and walked back to his squad. I tossed it into the glove compartment so it could share a cell with the other inmates. The events of the night finally caught up as I leaned the Concorde's bucket seat back, took a hit off the albuterol, and blew it into the air like cigarette smoke. Kinda strange since I was staring up at the car's smoke-stained roof. Previous owner's doing, not mine. This is rock bottom. I made a promise to do everything in my power to claw my way out of this dark place. Since I narrowly escaped death that night, all the fears that used to hold me back just seem trivial now and instantly evaporated. The next morning, I grabbed a notebook and pen and sat in a cafe all day until I had in front of me a solid 3-year plan. First wave was to teach out of my apartment, just a student or two to get the ball rolling. You gotta start somewhere. This is actually how I first met Derek. He answered my cringy online ad. Lessons with Luke. I turned soccer moms into rocker moms. I'll never live that one down. Next, I cut my teeth teaching lessons out of a booth at our local Guitar Central. Yeah, I know it's a corporate vibe, but they got the most customers, thus playing a big role in Tritone's demise. Does this make me some sort of traitor? Perhaps, But if it makes you feel any better, I only used them until I had enough experience to open my own studio, which took about a year and a half. Once my roster reached 50 students, I sent an email to several locations, and Pine Square Mall was the first to get back to me. Back to March 15th, 2008. The Levitating Man. Lisa said she saw someone walking around the mall the other night, well past closing time. She was finishing up all the paperwork for the year because it's tax time. She slaved away for so long that her eyes got tired and the numbers began to blur. While staring out the window to refocus, she saw an eerie silhouette of someone walking around my end of the mall. This was close to 1 a.m., an hour after I had already gone home.
Tell me the whole story. Like, what else did she see?
Derek seemed hungry for a fright. Well, then Lisa said something that gave me chills. Derek's eyes grew bigger as he hung on every word. She said that the mall walker stopped and just stared into my studio door for a long time. And when he eventually walked away, he dragged both feet in an odd fashion that made it look like he was slowly floating across the floor. I assume it's just some old war vet or something, happy to be walking at all. Who knows? Maybe he's interested in taking lessons.
Why was he here so late, though?
Maybe he has PTSD and can't sleep. Since it's so cold out, it just made sense to find another place to walk at night. I don't know, just another one of my theories.
But don't the mall doors automatically lock from the inside at closing time?
They're supposed to, but they stopped working a while back. Most of the lights still go out at 9, but the doors stay unlocked. Another reason I installed a camera.
Man, you should ream out your property manager. Isn't that like a huge safety hazard?
Well, I left him a few messages, but after I signed the lease, he's been a ghost. On top of that, the contact information they gave me for emergencies wasn't up to date. It was some disconnected number, probably of their former maintenance guy. Ask me how I found out the hard way. Derek throws his head back in laughter.
I don't know, but I'm pretty sure it has something to do with that huge water stain in the main practice area.
Yeah, there's nothing like coming to work the day after a big storm and finding 7 ceiling tiles obliterated all over your floor caused by a severe roof leak. God, that stale water smell is driving me batty.
Oh, shit, man. You should have called me. I would have helped you clean up.
I know you would have, and I appreciate it. But you know my Minnesota nice never lets me burden anyone. Plus, it was an embarrassing sight, and I much prefer to suffer in isolation. Derek bursts out laughing again, and then changes the subject.
So, what's on the agenda for tonight? Installing more spy gadgets?
Nah, just practicing drums for that student concert we're having next week. One of my bassists chose a Rush song for the band to perform, and none of my drum students can play it, so I have to.
Won't that piss off your neighbor? Aren't they usually here till like midnight?
Yeah, and it really bums me out because I didn't know that till after I signed the lease. I figured they just went home around 9 p.m. after they closed. Half the reason I wanted this space was just so I could practice as loud as I wanted to after hours. So, until they complain, I'm just gonna keep doing my thing.
All right, man. Well, just don't get kicked out of here. I'm really loving this 5-minute drive to lessons for a change.
I grab the last cable and hang it on the wall. This mall is so desperate, there's no way. I turn around to see that Derek had already gone. He's terrible at goodbyes and has this odd way of vanishing mid-sentence. Dragon House. Imagine every generic Asian restaurant in movies or TV shows, and that's pretty much it. They have all the stereotypical decor, including dragon statues, calendars featuring traditionally dressed models, which always gave me the creeps for some reason, red translucent paper lamps that look like hanging jellyfish, emerald knickknacks, orange neon lights everywhere, an aquarium in the corner with that one big pink fish that blankly stares at you with its puffy eyes, and they even have those paper zodiac placemats that tell you what animal sign you are. I'm a rabbit. We're supposed to be the luckiest of all signs, but my life hasn't really reflected it. I gave Dragon House a try after my first night of teaching. Could be awesome having a great restaurant right next door. I curiously ordered the dish my dad would always get when I was a kid, egg foo young. Wanted to see what all the hype was about, but after a few bites, I regretted it and wished that I had instead ordered my old favorite, sweet and sour chicken. Might not be the healthiest, but it's usually the safest bet at any Chinese restaurant. The Liu family has run this place for nearly a decade now. The daughters, Gracie, the smart one, and May, the pretty one, Wait tables. The mom, Lee, the serious one, runs the register and takes phone orders. And the father is the angry chef back in the kitchen. I've never actually seen him, but heard him shouting several times, usually while I'm teaching. Once in a while, he gets so belligerent that his wife has to abandon her post to calm him down. This has to be awkward when they have customers dining in. The first time I took out the trash in the back dumpster reserved for the mall tenants, one of the large black bags was busted open, perhaps chewed through by rats. Falling out of the bag was refuse from the Chinese kitchen, which almost put me off Asian cuisine forever, because mixed in with the food were hundreds of very plump maggots that will most likely be hungry again in an hour. Insert comedic drum hit here. Along with the food, several bottles of Jim Beam came out as well. They didn't serve booze at the restaurant, so the only two explanations were that either whiskey was one of their secret ingredients, or Father Lou had a taste for the hard stuff. This would explain all the aggression. Trust me, I know firsthand since my dad is also a friend of Jim's. Wood shedding. Learning a song as complicated as Rush's Free Will takes an intense amount of practice and patience. Some musicians call this woodshedding, which means you shut yourself into a private space and practice till your hands bleed. Okay, bleeding might be a bit extreme, but I usually come close. Because of my obsessive nature, it's common for me to repeat a drum beat hundreds of times until it's right. The goal is to make it so automatic that my body plays the song without the added effort of thinking. Tonight, this goes on for around 3+ hours until the sensation of blisters forming forces my hand. A quick root beer break sounds good anyway, as I imagine the feeling of the cold can on my fingers. The memory of the exploding Mr. Pibb gives me an embarrassing moment of nostalgic amusement. As the last cymbal hit fades, I hear a crude pounding in the lobby area. It sounds like someone smashing the front door in with a sledgehammer. What the hell is that? Late night construction? A break-in? A murderer with insomnia? My eyes desperately search around for some sort of weapon and only finds a neck that had been broken off of a BC Rich Warlock guitar. The damage wasn't caused by the rock star act of smashing it at the end of a concert, but from mysteriously falling off the wall hanger in the middle of the night, which makes for an interesting, but not as interesting a story. Both ends are deadly. One by the design of the headstock, think of an 80s hair metal style guitar, and the other side merely a sharp shard of wood caused by the accident. This will have to do. The new camera comes in handy as I'm able to see what's happening without having to get too close to the entrance area. But from this limited angle, all that can be seen is a clenched fist repeatedly slamming the metal door, very near the glass. And in that fist is a very large knife. He's hitting the door with the butt end of it in reverse psycho fashion. So glad for that safety glass, the kind with the metal wires in it. Even if he did break it, they'll stop him from reaching in and unlocking the door, at least in theory. The image flickers. The bashing halts as the attacker stares daggers through the window. It's an Asian man, wearing a Dragon House apron covered in blood. Father Lou? The blood is likely from his cooking duties, but now makes him look as threatening as Michael Myers. The dad of that sweet little Chinese family is now white with rage, eyes bulging in a murderous stare, and seems hellbent on breaking in and who knows what else. He begins to scream words in his native language. I'm guessing they were threats and profanities, while resuming his abuse of the door. The cold, nervous energy that fills my veins begins warming into aggression. Most likely a defense mechanism that's trying to prepare me for a possible mortal confrontation. In other words, Mortal Kombat. My phone is nearby, and even though it's probably too late to call the cops, I decide it's better to have it on me in case he does get in and I have to retreat into my studio's windowless bathroom. The sharp sound of the pounding knife is now replaced by the dull thud of him kicking the door. Not to stereotype, but I sure hope he doesn't know karate. I toss the wooden makeshift guitar sword and retrieve myself from the desk, but the kicking finally ceases. He screams his last words, and gives up. His footsteps retreat away in defeat into the deserted hallway. Decompressing takes several moments and a few puffs off the inhaler. My nervous system reacts as though I had just witnessed a violent murder, causing shaking legs as well as a strange metallic taste on my tongue. I put the phone back on the desk, relieved that I didn't have to use it after all. It would have taken them too long to get here anyway. This was no spontaneous outburst. It had to have been building up for a while. I picture him drunk raging in his kitchen night after night, scrubbing animal fat off the floors, spraying filthy dishes with scalding hot water, and disposing of rotting sea creatures' remains. All the while hearing nothing but the bashing of drums, the thumping of bass, and the screeching of guitars being blasted right on the other side of our shared wall. He finally snapped tonight. I pause. It's now that the realization really hit. What if he would have actually gotten in? Could 2 months of Taekwondo training, a childhood ninja obsession, and a broken guitar neck have been enough to protect me? If not, the news headlines would have been sadly hilarious. Music teacher murdered by Chinese chef driven mad by progressive rock beats. 30 minutes crawl by while I sit and listen for any mall noises. Nothing. I get up and check the glitchy security cam in case he's sitting out there waiting. Again, nothing. After an episode like that, he most likely went home. But to be safe, I better grab the guitar neck again to investigate the damage. In all the commotion, I lost track of where I put it, but it doesn't matter. I'll just stay close enough to the door to easily run back in and lock it at the first hint of danger. The overall damage ends up being less severe than anticipated. I mean, there are scratches, including a decent gash, but no large dents or cracked glass. The echo of the empty mall must have made each strike sound more intense than it actually was, even resembling gunfire at times. But then I noticed something odd. The window of the door is covered with a mist of saliva, boozy-smelling saliva. But there's also a sharp line of blood trailing down toward the bottom, almost reaching the floor. The boozy spit is understandable. I've been on the receiving end of scream spray, courtesy of Daddy Dearest, but the blood is unnerving and perplexing. Did he cut himself with a knife? There's also a slight smell of old garbage permeating. The mall's trash cans do look pretty full. Someone probably discarded their leftovers in there and it was causing this nauseating aroma. I should call the police now to have a record of the damage, but it might be better just to sweep this incident under the rug. He seemed to have blown off all his steam, and it might just make things worse to get the authorities involved. I'll just lay low till my lease is up. It's gonna be a long 4 years. As far as the door damage goes, perhaps it's better to just play dumb and act surprised if and when the landlord notices it for themselves. Wow, I have no idea what happened. Must have occurred in the middle of the night or something. Too bad those automatic locking doors weren't working. The sarcasm will be laid on thick. The source of the stench. The echo of his distant scream catches up to me from the end of the mall. As planned, I open the door and slide back into the lobby, turning the door handle and carefully closing it, feeling the resistance of the knob gently resetting back into place. This is something I picked up long ago as a kid with that ninja obsession. You wouldn't believe what you can learn from these old instructional books. Books that anyone can still order from the back of martial arts magazines. You can learn how to camouflage yourself in any environment, even snow, make deadly weapons with household objects, and walk in cat-like fashion to assassinate someone from behind. Neat stuff like that. The stealth skills allow me to enter without a sound, but twisting the lock does make a slight click. I backstep into my teaching room and watch the screen as it flickers enough of an image to potentially see who it is. The noises get closer and closer. Was he coming back for round 2? Maybe he went out to get a tire iron or something that would actually do the job. My hand reaches for my phone again, but this time I dial 911, hovering my thumb over the green icon, waiting for the first reason to push it. The steps are now so close I can hear them in great detail. They're the sound of dragging feet. Wait, the mall walker? A wave of sweet relief comes over me. Sorry, phone, another false alarm. At least the mall walker mystery will be solved tonight. I sit for a bit, quietly laughing and taking another hit off my inhaler, which I tend to overuse, as you could probably tell. The dragging feet are now so close that they almost seem like they're coming from inside the lobby. But still, no one has appeared in the door's window. Is my mind playing tricks on me? Were the footsteps even real? It's been a crazy day, but my ability to discern between fantasy and reality has a damn good track record. Curiosity gets the best of me, and I know there's no choice now but to confront the prankster. That rotting garbage scent begins to emanate again, this time into my lobby, getting stronger the closer I get to the entrance door. The mallwalker's still just out of view, and it's not until I'm inches from the window that there's anything to see, but it's still only a partial silhouette. The rotten air is now so overwhelming, I almost gag. But like with Tiny Pete's worm, I hold back. Why is he just standing there? Indecision grips me as I take a step toward the door and then immediately backstep, realizing it's a damned if I do or don't situation.
Hey, can I help you with something?
I call out in vain. Whoever it is doesn't want to be seen and apparently doesn't want to be heard either.
You should come back during business hours. Mall security is on their way.
There's no overnight security guard, of course, and I realize the mall walker probably knows that too.
I have to show you something.
Speaks a meek voice so gentle it doesn't produce an echo.
It's very important. About what just took place.
The voice was almost childlike.
Okay, but just so you know, I have a weapon. If there's any funny business, I'm using it.
God, I hope they buy it.
No funny business. I promise.
That's just what someone who was going to do some funny business would say. Let's just get this over with. I grasp the cold doorknob and begin counting backwards from 3, 2, 1. A twist of the knob and a slight pull allow me just enough space to peek my eye out. I recoil as my hand covers my mouth in absolute terror. This is no elderly mall walker standing in front of me. This is some thing. A swirling yet stable shadow figure in the form of a man, but not at all human. There's an ancient quality to it, like a statue had come to life, and it drifts slightly forward and backward, making that familiar dragging sound as it does. Though it appears somewhat ghost-like, it's solid enough to allow it to make the physical sounds. This entity that hovers before me, it is the source of the stench. Slamming the door shut sends a sharp echo through the dense, vicious air, but a black burst of smoke seeps up from beneath the door's gap and reforms as the entity. We are now standing in the studio lobby, facing each other as the long echo decays into silence. Its eyes have now appeared, glowing red and moving like fast flickering flames of a candle in a breeze. A hideous sound begins to somehow laugh from its mouthless face.
It's been an eternity.
It says in two distinct voices, one a somewhat normal sounding pitch, and the other so low and resonant it makes my skull vibrate. Paralyzed in place, I could do nothing but attempt to reply, which I only accomplish after a good amount of stammering.
What are you? How do you know me?
No thank yous? Not even a hint of gratitude?
It seems genuinely insulted.
Gratitude? For what?
For saving you from that machete-wielding maniac.
You did that?
He was gonna murder you, you know. Chop you up into little pieces just like he does to the creatures on his cutting board. Probably feed you to his dog, too. Or maybe his customers.
How do you know all this? He was just mad at the noise I was making.
At first. But as I approached, his anger turned to terror. It was delightful. Did you catch what he said before he ran off?
My fried hard drive of a mind couldn't retrieve an answer.
He said something in Chinese, I think.
He said "Bagwo," which means help me. Why would he be begging for help if he was attacking you?
The shadow lets out an amused exhale that ends in a wheezing sound, much like a smoker sometimes do, sending a dark cloud of rotting gas into my face. Once again, I hold back the gag reflex. I'm getting pretty good at this now.
First he came for you, but then he was begging you to protect him from me. How I miss the ironies this realm has to offer.
Why did you save me? Who are you?
The entity laughs again.
You have no idea, do you?
Obviously not.
Maybe this will ring a bell. Here goes nothing.
he says in a Jack Nicholson "Here's Johnny" cadence while violently lunging forward.
Those were the last 3 words you said before you betrayed me.
I can see its eyes becoming an even brighter shade of vengeful red.
Come with me.
It eerily whispers and places its hand on my forehead. Memory lane. A blinding flash strikes me as I'm taken through a seamlessly endless tube of sparks and colors. It's nearly impossible to keep my head from shooting straight back from the sheer force. There's a sensation like my brain is an electric top spinning faster and faster as it transports me to a different dimension. When it finally winds down, I can hear a familiar sound. It was a muffler sporadically scraping the road. I'm sitting in the filthy back seat of my old '87 Concorde with empty Mr. Pibb cans, fast food wrappers, unused plastic bags for the newspapers, and a stack of compact discs. In the 2 front seats are the shadow figure and somehow me. This me is driving down the old familiar paper route while the entity is in the passenger seat staring back, making me feel like a child again. I see the I-94 bridge approaching.
Wasn't this fun, Lucas?
Taunted the entity.
Didn't you feel alive for once in your sad little life?
No, I shuddered. I was in some strange trance, not really myself.
Liar!
The shadow snaps.
How would you know?
Trust me, Lucas. I know you as well as you know yourself.
As the car speeds up towards the bridge, I begin to panic. I'm not used to being a passenger in my own vehicle and hate the feeling of not being in control.
Hey, you! I mean me, I cry out. Pull over! Slow down!
The driver doesn't respond.
He can't hear you. Yell all you want.
The shadowy passenger points at the dashboard with his long, bony black finger. It was that cheap, realistic time, date, and temperature device I bought when I started the job. My best friend Christian recommended I get one to keep me on schedule. The date somehow read August 13th, 2006. The significance of this date sparks a realization.
It all makes sense now. I must have fallen asleep waiting for Father Lou to leave, and all this is a nightmare of that crazy night. Of course, what took place was never really processed, and this is just my brain's way of trying to clear itself of trauma.
Guess again, Lucas.
Laughs the entity.
Now pay attention. This is the best part.
This was right about the time that I uttered the phrase, "Here goes nothing," and then decide to give in to the cop's demands and pull over. The other Luke closes his eyes and whispers the phrase as predicted, making me feel like a backseat film director. Now cue the police lights and pull over. Wait, why isn't he pulling over? The entity seems quite amused. The clicking sound of the other Lucas's unbuckling seatbelt happens seconds before my head slams into the side window as we violently turn. We fly perpendicular to the lines on the road, and all I can see in front of us is that narrow gap that occurs just before the bridge railing begins. The speedometer reads 65, and we easily blast right through the hole. Can't believe I ever doubted this car. The fear feels like 1,000 hot pins piercing me everywhere all at once. The free fall is worse than the steepest roller coaster drop I ever experienced. The engine sounds like a blender on liquefy now that the tires have no resistance from the pavement. I can do nothing but moan out the rest of my air in terror. The impact is so extreme I black out, but then flash right back into this hellscape. I'm trapped between the seats. Everything is on fire, yet I feel nothing. Am I paralyzed? Am I dead? How come I'm not burning up? My eyes focus back on the 2 figures in the front of the car. The other me is clearly dead, slumped over while the fire quickly dissolves all traces of human features, leaving him just a black, burning mass. The steering column appears to have impaled his chest as well. The shadow figure is also engulfed in flames, but isn't reacting. Instead, it just stares at me, gleefully taking in my torment.
Don't feel even an ounce of sorrow for him,
says the shadow, pointing at what used to be me.
Nothing remains in that charred casing he called a body just seconds ago. Just a bag of bones now, soon to be a pile of ashes in this urn he used to call a car.
How am I even talking to you? I should be dead too.
You'll know the whole story soon enough.
Now the entity sounds a bit more spiteful.
This did not happen. I pulled over. I survived that night.
So what do you think you're experiencing now?
Well,
I try to swallow, but my throat is too dry.
is this all just a hallucination? Perhaps an alternate reality? Another one of my crazy theories, I suppose.
There's so much more to it, but it's doubtful that you'll believe me when I tell you.
The flames continue to rage all around us, but our intimate dialogue continues.
At this point, I think I'll believe anything.
I needed to use my inhaler again, but couldn't move. It was hard to complain, though, about having to sit and suffer while looking at the other me who was now burning down to a skeleton.
First, you should know that what you experienced here was what really happened.
Even in my numb state, I could feel a sharp chill travel up my spine.
So I'm dead?
No, you're very much alive, and you have your other self to thank for it. He pulled a fast one on me before we hit the ground. Quite the clever fellow.
What did he do?
A change of heart.
The moment we passed the point of no return, he thought ahead to his own funeral. He saw the faces of everyone in attendance and realized the immense suffering he put them through. But it wasn't until he specifically imagined his mother that it really hit home. He saw the woman who always unconditionally loved him, completely devastated. He recalled a time when he'd been crying as a child. His father had just whipped him for accidentally spilling orange juice on their new couch. Tears streamed down, and his nose began to run as his mother held him in her arms. She could have sent him to the restroom or got up to get a tissue, but she wanted to continue holding him until he calmed down. So instead, she wiped away the snot from his nostrils and upper lip using nothing but her bare hand. This memory of Mother's visceral love crushed him, and now he felt sorrow and regret like never before. It came from an authentic place this time, not the kind of selfish sorry that you say when you're trying to get yourself out of trouble, but the kind that only comes when you have nothing left to gain. With eyes closed, his final thought before colliding with the ground was, "Please forgive me." This all happened in a matter of seconds.
I looked deeply into the figure's face, and what was just a void with red eyes now begins to physically manifest. As the features slowly begin to form, I'm horrified to see that it resembles me.
You meddled with the fabric of reality, and the timeline was reconstructed. In that moment, we were split apart, and you got transported back with your memory altered, while I was left to perish in this burning wreck. My punishment for failing was so harsh, even demons wept. Your last 3 words of repent may have saved you, but it damned me to the 9th circle.
The figure's face is now fully formed as my own, only it's a dim gray color, as if every bit of life were drained from it. The rearview mirror had been shattered, otherwise I'm sure I'd see that my own face looked much the same right now.
You don't know what I had to endure to get back. A year in your reality is hundreds below. I suffered for centuries, did my time in that stinking pit, paid my dues, climbed the ladder rung, by endless rung, but I escaped. Ambition is still a powerful thing, even in hell.
You came back to seek revenge? To kill me?
I muttered out, now fearing for my life all over again.
Have you noticed that things have been better for you since that night? Did you no longer spend your days in a constant state of despair?
Yeah, until now, that is.
Even in a situation like this, I attempt to joke. This only proves the entity right. I am different. I have changed.
But why here at my job? Why not just get me at home while I'm sleeping and at my most vulnerable?
I could have. The ability to freely travel anywhere in this realm is a power I do possess. But I wanted to confront you at the very place that brings you the most joy. The dream job you always wanted to have, but never had the stones to pursue. That is, until we were separated. You should have seen the look on your face as you opened the door. Centuries of plotting paid off. The abandoned mall was also a fitting venue. Although I didn't plan on running into the maniac chef. That was just a bonus, an appetizer if you will. Another sweet irony to add to the list.
The reality sets in that I had lived my last day, taught my last student, would never see my family again, never get to be more than friends with Lisa, and never play drums on Free Will for my students' band. It all ends here tonight. I couldn't hold back the emotions, and tears began running down my face and dripping off my quivering chin.
Mommy not here to wipe them away?
Now the entity launches fully into its wickedness.
What I went through will not be wiped off the slate with a few little tears. You don't get off that easy.
I dry the tears off with my shoulder and keep my head down to avoid the full-on wrath coming from the entity's rant.
Your existence is an insult to me. Each day you wake up, every time you get to do what you love, every moment you naively carry on with your life is the equivalent of pissing on my grave. As you live your best life,
The shadow says in a sarcastic tone.
I carry the weight and the stench of eternal damnation.
I can't think of a response. The sound of police sirens finally begins to arrive. Perhaps there's still a shred of hope. The shadow responds by lifting its finger in the air and slowly directs it toward me.
The time has finally come to make things whole again.
It points its ghastly finger at my face and continues to move it closer and closer, for some reason at my mouth. I feel the long, crooked, bony appendage pierce my lips as I fight to resist its efforts. With a vicious thrust, it stabs the back of my throat with a splintered fingernail before scraping its way past my tonsils and down my windpipe. The sharp, sour finger causes me to instantly gag, but the shadow figure was not done. Not even close. I now feel my throat tearing apart as the entire hand unyieldingly forces its way through. The sound is similar to ripping a head of cabbage in half. My body begins to shut down from all the pain, suffocation, and bleeding as now the creature's arm reaches in. It seems as impossible as a python attempting to swallow a hyena, but somehow does. It's trying to crawl all the way inside me. The last thing I remember seeing is its hideous, smiling face morphing, twisting and laughing with pure delight as it enters. March 16th, 2008. Mama's Boy. Waking up in my office chair has me trembling and very confused. It takes slapping myself and shaking my head a few times to dispel the drowsiness. What's going on? The clock reads 10 a.m. It was strange to be at my studio at such a time since I keep music teacher hours and normally don't arrive till around 3 p.m. each day. The odd position of the sun through my main window casts unfamiliar shadows, making the space seem somewhat foreign. The security monitor flickers nearby, igniting the memory of my nightmare. Oh my God, it was a dream. I wanted to jump up and rejoice like Ebenezer at the end of A Christmas Carol, but damn, I had to take a piss. Being such a creature of habit, it's disorienting not to be in my apartment bathroom first thing after waking. I know that bathroom so well, I could do my entire morning routine during a blackout. The fluorescent light struggles to illuminate fully as I take what had to have been the longest number one ever, what we politely called urinating as kids. The light finally stabilizes. I peek at the mirror to inspect the damage. Probably look like hot death. I know I feel it. My sight is slightly blurred, and my eyes feel like sandpaper because I slept with my contacts in. Those who don't wear contact lenses may not know this, but throughout the day, the lenses actually float and shift a bit to adjust to the blinking and movements of your eye. When you leave them in all night, they can dry out and stick to your eyeball, feeling like you accidentally used superglue instead of saline solution. Which reminds me, I don't have any here. Just gonna have to use plain old tap water and hope for the best. The trick is to wet the tip of your finger and then touch your contact until you can move it slightly from side to side, trying not to suction off your cornea in the process. By then, your tears can get in and do the rest of the job. Never thought I could get used to doing something as non-instinctual as touching my own eyeball. The thirst from my dream carries over into waking life, so I do something I rarely do and swig a handful right from the filthy bathroom sink. Reminds me of being a kid again, back when bottled water was considered a luxury and not a given. I slapped the remainder of the cool water on my face, hoping to calm the puffy redness down to a manageable level. A trace of a voice begins sounding from the lobby area, but it's far too early for any students to be here. My semi-deaf ears make it impossible to decipher, but the closer I get to the lobby, the more familiar it gets. It's a newscaster from our local station being played on the lobby's television. Who the hell turned this on?
The murder happened last night in Pine Square Mall, where police found the body of Dragon House owner and chef Ang Lu, left in a grotesque and disturbing fashion. His body was suspended against a wall and was being held up by what appears to be a broken-off section of a guitar. I'm told it's called the neck. That was apparently driven, ironically enough, through the victim's neck. Quite the grisly sight. The murder weapon is now in police custody, and a forensic team is attempting to match the fingerprints back to its owner. Officers will continue to question other mall tenants for more leads and clues.
This can't be true. The guitar neck's right over here.
I search all around the area where I last remember having it. The phone is where it should be, on the desk. The cables are still neatly hung on the wall, but no sign of the broken warlock neck.
Someone must have come in while I slept and stole it. But why would they kill Mr. Liu? None of this makes any sense.
A realization suddenly dawns on me.
My fingerprints are all over that thing. It's my guitar neck, for God's sake.
Then another thought hits, completing the 1-2 punch.
His blood is still on my door.
A stern knock causes the front door to tremble. I want to believe it's Lisa checking up to see why I'm at work so early, but it's far too strong a knock to be from her delicate bones. With heavy, trembling legs, I retreat back into the restroom and lock the door, trying to buy some precious time. I look in the mirror, deep into my own panicked eyes, and say out loud,
"This can't be real. Please let me still be dreaming, please."
I pinch the skin on the back of my hand to check, but can feel its sharp sensation. A red flash flickers from my eyes, much like the struggling bathroom light did. This is followed by the entity's dual-voice laughter sounding from inside my head.
It wasn't all a dream.
My fists clench in pure rage as the painful scream of, "Get the hell out of me!" rattles the bathroom walls. This one even beats out the paper route scream. I thrust my finger down my throat in an attempt to expel the creature the same way it entered. This only results in throwing up a small amount of stomach bile. My eyes have now settled to a constant glow of red and burn with a fiery intensity. One of my still clenched fists punches the mirror, shattering it to bits. My reflection breaks into several pieces and falls to the floor, becoming the perfect metaphor.
I need to get out. I can't live like this. It won't ever leave me alone. Not until I completely lose my mind, or...
The knocking persists.
This is Pine City Police. We have a few questions for you. Open up.
The thought of spending the rest of my life in a 6x8 cell was too overwhelming to even consider.
There's no way I beat this. What judge is gonna believe that it wasn't me, but some shadowy figure who murdered the man with my broken guitar neck? This damn old mall doesn't even have security cameras to prove my story.
I grab the biggest piece I can find of the broken mirror glass that now litters the bathroom floor. In its reflection, I can see the disturbing desperation on my now pale face. I've never felt so scared, alone, and helpless. A sweet memory offers a moment's respite. I was 4 years old and just had an intense nightmare. There was this giant flaming hand that was chasing me, trying to grab and pull me down to hell. I knew it was patiently waiting for me to return, so I didn't want to go back to sleep. I climbed out of bed and knocked on my parents' bedroom door. Mom noticed I was crying and let me sleep between her and Dad for the first time. The familiar combination of Dad's stale beer scent mixed with the warmth of Mom's perfume made me instantly drowsy, much like the time I took a plastic capful of that thick, green sleep medicine. I felt bulletproof. There wasn't a safer place in the whole world. I quickly drifted off to dreamland, and the demon hand that haunted me was nowhere to be found. If heaven exists, it's in the vicinity of what I felt that night. The memory is rudely interrupted by more intense pounding, along with a growing volume of the entity's voice.
They're coming to take you away, haha. They're coming to take you away.
My right hand holds the glass, and the other is now holding the back of my head like my mom's used to whenever I was in pain or distress, even as I got sick in the toilet. God, I'm such a mama's boy. As the large shard grazes the far side of my neck, I feel the heavy pulsing of my carotid arteries, filled with the same blood that will soon thaw this cold bathroom floor in warm crimson red. The sound of my lobby door busting open is followed by many hurried footsteps across the hardwood studio floor. I don't even flinch. A strange peace has now come over me, knowing I've passed the point of no return. Nothing but the sting of the blade to scare me now. An ill-timed thought arises. I guess my father would be thrilled that I'm following through with something. As I give myself a pity laugh, I'm reminded of my last lesson with Derek. I'll miss him, as well as our conversations. I can just hear him saying,
Should have called me. Minnesota nice be damned. I would have come down and helped you out, man. Why'd you have to do this? Why?
The locked bathroom door violently rattles as I whisper my last three words.